8 Black Sox players for gambling. Let's go back to 1919, when one of the darkest scandals in sports history took place. 8 members of the Chicago White Sox, later branded the Black Sox, were accused of conspiring with gamblers to deliberately lose the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. The players allegedly accepted money in exchange for muffed plays, easy outs, and intentional errors that tilted the series. While a jury later acquitted them in court, baseball's first commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, took a much harder stance. He banned all 8 players for life in 1921, declaring that anyone who compromised the integrity of the game had no place in Major League Baseball. Decades afterward, names like Shoeless Joe Jackson and Eddie Cicotte lived more in whispered folklore than in official histories. They became bad examples of talented men who threw away immortality for a quick payday. For over a century, their stories drifted between myth and controversy. Some argued that Jackson, who hit well during the series, wasn't truly guilty. Others claimed the punishment was too severe compared to other scandals that followed. But Major League Baseball stood firm, keeping their bans intact as a symbolic shield protecting the sport from corruption. The stance was a clear attempt to make the world forget such nastiness existed within the league, and that the players involved would be no more than ghost stories. However, on July 1, 2025, everything changed. Commissioner Rob Manfred issued a surprise announcement that the 8 Black Sox players were officially reinstated posthumously. Their names, once erased, reappeared in the official record books, and while this doesn't put them in the Hall of Fame, it restores their legacies as part of baseball's history rather than a footnote of shame. Suddenly, a century-old ghost story found new life, setting the stage for more shocking tales of bans and reinstatements in baseball lore. Ferguson Jenkins. Fast forward to June 1980, Ferguson Jenkins, a Cy Young award-winning pitcher and future Hall of Famer, was returning home with his Texas Rangers teammates when Canadian customs officers stopped him in Toronto. In his luggage, they found small amounts of cocaine, marijuana, and hashish. Of course, the discovery sent shockwaves through the baseball world. Drugs were becoming a national crisis, and the image of a star player tied to narcotics threatened both his reputation and the league's image. Commissioner Bowie Kuhn immediately suspended Jenkins for the rest of the season. At the time, the decision seemed final and unforgiving, as baseball had no tolerance for such behavior. But Jenkins didn't go down quietly. He appealed his case, and an independent arbitrator later reinstated him, ruling that the commissioner had acted too harshly without a proper hearing. Jenkins rejoined the Rangers, finished out his career, and retired after the 1983 season. Yes, the man whose name was almost forgotten had clawed his way back. But it didn't stop there, because in 1991, he earned baseball's highest honor, as he was induction into the Hall of Fame. To many, this proved that redemption was possible even after a scandal. Jenkins continued to serve as an ambassador for the sport, mentoring younger players and speaking out about the pressures of fame and substance abuse. His story remains complicated. On one hand, he was a dominant pitcher with over 3,000 strikeouts and a reputation for durability. On the other, his career will always be remembered for that airport bust, a moment when drugs nearly derailed his legacy. Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. Few names shine brighter in baseball history than Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. Both were icons of the game and huge stars whose talent and charisma defined an era. Yet even legends weren't immune to punishment. In 1980, Commissioner Bowie Kuhn made a stunning decision. He banned Willie Mays, who had been retired for nearly a decade, from working with Major League Baseball. His offense was serving as a casino greeter in Atlantic City. Ironically, the casino did not offer sports betting, but Kuhn argued that any association with gambling was unacceptable for someone tied to baseball's reputation. Just 3 years later, the same fate befell Mickey Mantle, another Hall of Famer who had taken on a similar role. Suddenly, 2 of the game's most beloved figures were blacklisted, not for betting on games, not for altering outcomes, but simply for standing in a casino and signing autographs. The decision drew criticism, especially since both men had already given their best years to baseball. Fans felt robbed of seeing their heroes honored at old-timers games and official ceremonies. To be honest, Mays and Mantle weren't criminals. They were just trying to stay visible and earn a living after their playing days. Yet to Kuhn, perception mattered more than fairness. In his eyes, even the slightest association with gambling could tarnish baseball's integrity, which had already been scarred from the Black Sox scandal decades earlier. Eventually, their bans were lifted under Kuhn's successor, Peter Ueberroth, allowing them to rejoin the baseball family. But for a time, two living legends were erased from the sport they helped build. It was a sobering reminder that in baseball, no name is too big to be struck from the record. Now let's talk about Pete Rose, the most famous band player of them all. On August 24, 1989, the all-time Major League hits leader, with 4,256 to his name, was placed on the league's ineligible list. Rose, who had managed the Cincinnati Reds after a legendary playing career, was accused of betting on baseball games, including those involving his own team. To Commissioner Bart Giamatti, this was the ultimate betrayal of the game's trust. Unlike Mays and Mantle, Rose wasn't guilty by association, as he had directly violated baseball's most sacred rule. You don't gamble on the sport you play. His punishment was swift and absolute. Rose was banned indefinitely, and his name was removed from official team events. His Hall of Fame candidacy was ultimately erased before it could even begin. For years, Rose denied the allegations, maintaining his innocence in interviews and books. But in 2004, he finally admitted what many already believed, that he had in fact bet on baseball. By then, his pleas for reinstatement had become a yearly ritual, always denied by successive commissioners. Meanwhile, his supporters argue that his accomplishments on the field are undeniable, and that no scandal can erase his hits, his hustle, or his place in baseball history. His detractors, however, counter that betting on the game cuts at the very core of its integrity. Even as recently as the 2020s, petitions and debates continued over whether Rose deserved a second chance. If the Black Sox were baseball's original scandal, Pete Rose became its modern symbol of punishment. Marty Bergen. Marty Bergen's story is one of the darkest tragedies ever connected to Major League Baseball. A gifted catcher for the Boston Beaneaters in the late 1890s, Bergen was admired for his defensive skills behind the plate and his ability to handle pitchers. But away from the diamond, he battled severe mental health struggles that, at the time, were neither well understood nor properly treated. Bergen's paranoia and bouts of erratic behavior grew more alarming with each passing season. Teammates and coaches noticed, but the culture of that era often dismissed mental illness as weakness. Sadly, in January 1900, Bergen's inner turmoil reached a horrifying peak. In a fit of psychosis, he murdered his wife and two young children with an axe before taking his own life. The incident shocked not only the baseball world, but the entire country. This was the sort of story the MLB didn't want coming out. Notwithstanding, newspapers reported it as an almost unspeakable crime. But within the baseball establishment, the reaction was one of silence. Bergen's name quickly vanished from team records, yearbooks, and official histories. It was as if the sport collectively decided to erase him, unwilling to reconcile the brutal act with his once promising career. This erasure speaks volumes about how uncomfortable baseball, and society in general, was in dealing with issues of mental health and violence. Bergen could have been remembered as a necessary example for future generations to understand the hidden struggles athletes endure. Instead, he became a ghost in baseball history, forgotten by design. His story is not just about a man undone by illness, but about how the game itself turned its back, preferring to pretend he never existed. Dave Winfield. Dave Winfield's story takes us in a very different direction, though no less dramatic. By the late 1980s, Winfield was one of baseball's brightest stars. A multi-sport athlete drafted in 4 different professional leagues, he chose baseball and became a force with the San Diego Padres before joining the New York Yankees in 1981. He was a towering presence on the field, known for his power, defense, and leadership. Yet behind the glamour of pinstripes, a feud was brewing between him and Yankees owner George Steinbrenner. Winfield had signed a massive contract, but Steinbrenner grew resentful of both the money and Winfield's influence, and by 1990, the tension escalated into one of the strangest scandals in Yankee history. Steinbrenner hired a shady private investigator to dig up dirt on his own player, hoping to smear Winfield's reputation and void commitments made to Winfield's charitable foundation. It was an act of betrayal almost unthinkable between an owner and one of his stars. When the truth came out, Commissioner Fay Vincent acted decisively. Steinbrenner was banned from baseball for life, and the Yankees were forced to operate without their famously domineering boss. For Winfield, the damage was personal. Though he carried on with his career, the betrayal by the man who should have been his biggest supporter left scars. Steinbrenner, of course, didn't stay gone. By 1993, Bud Selig reinstated him, and Steinbrenner returned to the helm of the Yankees. But the episode revealed the ugly side of power in sports and the lengths to which an owner would go to discredit his own players. What should have been a proud era in Yankee history became tainted by pettiness and sabotage. Steve Howe. If Bergen's tragedy was about mental health and Winfield's about power, Steve Howe's story is one of addiction. This was a theme baseball has confronted time and again. Howe was a left-handed pitcher with enormous talent. He broke into the majors with the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1980, immediately making an impact. And by 1981, he was Rookie of the Year, as he helped the Dodgers win the World Series. But behind the success lurked a destructive relationship with drugs and alcohol that would define his career. Howe's battles with cocaine and substance abuse led to suspension after suspension. By the late 1980s, after several comebacks and relapses, he was with the Yankees. But instead of stability, the same pattern repeated. He had flashes of brilliance, undone by poor choices and dependency. In 1992, after his 7th suspension, Major League Baseball had had enough. Commissioner Fay Vincent banned Howe from the game permanently. Yet Howe wasn't ready to be forgotten. He appealed, won reinstatement, and fought his way back to the mound. In some ways, his career symbolized resilience. He was an athlete unwilling to be completely broken by his demons. He pitched until 1996 before retiring, but the underlying struggles never truly went away. In 2006, tragedy struck when Howe died in a car accident in California. Tests revealed methamphetamine in his system, another sad reminder of the grip addiction held over him. His death wasn't just the loss of a ball player, but the closing of a story that reflected a much larger problem in sports and society. Howe's life showed how fame and talent are no shield against the disease of addiction, and how even second and third chances to rewrite one's name aren't always enough.
Jenrry Mejía.
Jenrry Mejía's downfall brought baseball into the modern-day controversies surrounding performance-enhancing drugs. Mejía, a promising pitcher from the Dominican Republic, rose quickly through the Mets system. By 2014, he was closing games for New York, showcasing electric stuff and the kind of energy fans love. But his career took a dramatic turn that no one could have predicted. In April 2015, Mejía tested positive for a banned substance and received an 80-game suspension. That might have been survivable, but just months later, he failed another test, earning a full season suspension. Incredibly, before even returning to the field, he tested positive a third time in February 2016. Then Major League Baseball handed down the harshest penalty available. He was given a lifetime ban, which made him the first player ever to be permanently banned under the league's drug policy. The case stunned fans and analysts alike. It wasn't just the repeated violations, it was the speed with which they piled up. Mejía claimed he was the victim of a conspiracy, that MLB was making an example of him. He fought the ban legally and eventually reached an agreement with Commissioner Rob Manfred, Then, in July 2018, he was reinstated and was eligible to return after restrictions ended the following spring. Mejía did rejoin the Mets' Dominican Summer League team in 2018, but he never made it back to a major league mound. And just like that, many fans forgot that he even existed. His story is heartbreaking not because of scandal alone, but because of wasted potential. He became a reminder of how quickly opportunity can vanish when choices, desperation, and short-term gains override long-term vision. Tyler Skaggs. On July 1, 2019, the baseball world was shaken by the sudden death of Los Angeles Angels pitcher Tyler Skaggs. Just 27 years old, Skaggs was found unresponsive in his hotel room in Southlake, Texas, while the team was on the road to face the Rangers. The news spread quickly across sports media, but the details of what had happened took time to come into focus. An autopsy later revealed that Skaggs had choked on his own vomit after consuming a deadly mix of fentanyl, oxycodone, and alcohol. The revelation sparked shock and outrage, not only because of his young age and the loss of potential, but also because it continued to expose drug use within MLB's ranks. In 2020, a team employee named Eric K. was indicted and later convicted for supplying Skaggs with the opioids that led to his death. The trial pulled back the curtain on what many suspected but was rarely acknowledged publicly. For a short time, Skaggs' name was everywhere, including tribute patches, in memorials at stadiums, and in emotional interviews with teammates. Yet, as the seasons moved forward, his story faded from headlines. MLB paid its respects, but it did not linger on the uncomfortable questions raised about drugs in the game. Today, Skaggs is remembered more as a tragedy rather than as the promising pitcher he once was. Roberto Alomar. Just 2 years after the Skaggs incident, MLB was once again forced to confront an uncomfortable scandal. On April 30, 2021, the league announced that Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar had been placed on its ineligible list after an independent investigation confirmed that he had sexually harassed a female staffer back in 2014. The move was quick and brutal. MLB cut ties with one of its most decorated stars, a player who had not only been enshrined in Cooperstown, but also held a place of honor in Toronto. The Blue Jays immediately removed Alomar's banner from Rogers Center and stripped his number 12 from the team's level of excellence, a symbolic erasure meant to distance the organization from his legacy. But the contradiction was hard to ignore. Alomar remained in the Hall of Fame, untouched by the punishment. His plaque still hangs in Cooperstown, and visitors can still read about his achievements as if nothing had changed. For many fans, that inconsistency was unsettling. How could he be celebrated in one space while condemned in another? The situation highlighted baseball's uneven approach to handling misconduct. For MLB, it was easier to cut ties with Alomar the ambassador than with Alomar the Hall of Famer. The scandal struck at the heart of what the Hall is meant to represent. Not just talent, but character and legacy. Alomar's removal from the public eye was sudden and complete, yet his permanent enshrinement ensures his story isn't entirely erased. It's a contradiction that still lingers in the sport's conscience. Tucupita Marcano. Just recently, the league faced another black mark, this time tied to baseball's growing concern with gambling. On June 4, 2024, Padres shortstop Tucupita Marcano was handed one of MLB's harshest punishments, a lifetime ban for betting on games. The investigation revealed that Marcano had placed wagers on multiple contests, including those involving the Pittsburgh Pirates, his former team. That revelation was more than just a violation of league policy, as it cut directly into the integrity of the sport, a line MLB has fiercely guarded since the infamous Black Sox scandal of 1919. Marcano's punishment was immediate. The Padres released him the same day, and within hours, fans had already distanced themselves from his name. At just 24 years old, his career was frozen in time, ending not because of a lack of talent, but because of a mistake that MLB refuses to forgive. The timing was particularly striking, given baseball's current embrace of legalized sports betting partnerships. Ads for sportsbooks flash across broadcasts, and stadiums even host betting kiosks. Against that backdrop, Marcano's ban felt both predictable and ironic. the league is making billions from gambling, while drawing a hard line against its players ever participating. For Marcano, the fallout was merciless. He went from being a young player with potential to being a bad example overnight. His story reminds us of baseball's unforgiving stance on gambling, one of the few areas where the league can scratch off a player's name for good, no matter who gets caught. Matusz. So far, the most recent case of trying to erase a player's name happened in 2025, when former Orioles pitcher Matusz was found dead in his Phoenix home at just 37 years old. His mother, Elizabeth, was the one who found him, and that was a devastating detail that added another layer of heartbreak to the news. Police reported that he likely died from a drug overdose, noting that a white substance was found in his mouth, along with drug paraphernalia nearby. It was a grim ending for a player who had once been a first-round draft pick, carrying the weight of high expectations throughout his career. Matusz had battled addiction before, and according to reports, he had been clean for 8 months. He had even spoken openly about his struggles, telling those close to him that nothing is left for me. Those words now ring tragically in hindsight, a haunting glimpse into the loneliness and despair he carried. For many fans, his name had long since drifted into obscurity. He last pitched in the majors in 2016, but the news of his death resurfaced memories of what might have been. Like Skaggs, his passing was covered briefly and then quickly dropped from the spotlight. The league acknowledged it, but did not dwell on it for long, as it wanted the story forgotten. Sure, these stories are reminders of the human struggles behind the stats, but they are also narratives the sport often prefers to move past. Matusz's death, like the others, reveals the fragile line players walk between professional glory and personal battles, and how easily they can be forgotten once the games are over. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inside MLB stories. Now go check out our next video.